Welcome to TecSocial. I just hope you listen in your but we're going to get started. So I'm thinking what we should do is probably just go around and do a little introduction, maybe a little bit of your background, and then we'll dive into some questions and take questions from the crowd as well. So do you want to start there?
Sure. My name is Sarah Conrad, and I am the manager of Institute Partnerships and Research Commercialization at CBU. And my role sort of has two unique areas. One is that I work with our faculty and chat with them about their research to figure out if there's a commercialization potential of that research, and then figure out what that pathway would be. Oftentimes, that's partnering with entrepreneurs who might want to take that piece of technology and use it in their own business. Some of them want to do a startup or a spin out of their own. And on the other hand, I go out and meet entrepreneurs who want to tap into some expertise from the university, and we figure out how we can put a research project together with you to help with some of your R&D needs. So through all of those, I need to have a good understanding of IP, because I'm either helping faculty with work that they're patenting potentially themselves, or we're creating things in partnerships with each other that have that opportunity to tap into, a variety of types of intellectual property.
Okay. I'm Veronica Merrifield. I'm somewhat of an experienced technologist with an awful lot of weird and wonderful mixes of technology. Did mostly in electronics and software. I have 4 patents. Some of those I've done on my own, some have been done through patent lawyers. I work with all sorts of different companies doing some really interesting technology stuff. Otherwise a bit too difficult to explain, right?
Hi everyone, welcome to Fun with Patents.
That's what we should call it. Have a bigger crowd.
My name is Rob McKenzie. I'm with Trademarks IP. It's a consulting services company since 2011. And I help clients pursue, protect, and commercialize their innovations and technologies. And on the pursue side, we help on the inventor, on the ideation, help them find what they think they have as inventive steps. And if they feel that they have that, we have experts, patent agents and trademark agents that will help with protecting that, if that's something that they wanted to do. And then on commercialization, we can help with the technology licensing and some sales things that we could do there too. It's a later stage.
So I think the first question we'll throw at you guys is, what is the purpose of defining and protecting IP? I don't know if someone wants to jump in, or if you guys want to just go down the line.
So I think from a university perspective, sometimes it's a little different, but really the purpose of protecting your IP is to give yourself a little bit of a window in where you can figure out what it is you want to do for that, with that as your commercialization strategy. So it protects you in that you get your patents, and then there's a little bit of a nuance. So when you create something, what it does is it creates a bar from anyone else being able to commercialize what it is that you created. Depending on what it is, you might not be able to commercialize it independently without going into partnership with another patent or IP holder, but it gives you this little bit of a piece of technology or intellectual property that then you can use to create a business for yourself, either through partnership or through developing your own startup or spin-out. And I think the real purpose is that when you're looking to create value for yourself, and when you're looking to show that you have something that other people are going to want to invest in, this idea of having intellectual property wrapped around it, be it a patent or a trademark or a copyright, gives people that confidence that they can invest money in you, and that someone else isn't going to come out on the marketplace ahead of you and then do the exact same thing, sort of wrecking their investment. So it gives you that position to be able to move your idea forward quite a bit.
Yeah.
Is that it?
I can't feel.
Yeah,
Protection.
gives you that protection, and again, you don't want others just jumping in on the money and time that you've spent, right? So I want to protect that, because what I say to a lot of people is the window is always closing. As soon as you come up with that idea, that window starts closing. Your job is to get as much revenue out of that window before it closes. And so patents and trademarks are a way to prop that window up for just a little bit longer and allow you to get more revenue through that.
So I think determined that if we have some IP, maybe you're like, okay, I'm gonna go down this road, I'm the right road to go down. What does that pathway look like in terms of, I guess, maybe like general steps of how you're moving? And maybe like, can you do that on your own? Like as an entrepreneur, is that a path you go down, or should you look at hiring a lawyer to help you?
Yeah, I'll check that one. So whether you hire a lawyer or not really depends on your skill set and your ability. One of the things I was going to interject previously is that the whole patent process is a legal process. It has a legal framework for registering the patent. It has a legal framework for defending the patent. And there's certain criteria within patents that have to fulfill those legal obligations. There's certain wordings that they use for how you construct that patent, how you have the description written up for one's skill in the art, and the claims are the legal part of that patent. You can certainly do it yourself, and there is a very good guidebook, which I just happen to have a copy of, and probably want to have a look at later, on how to do that for a patent yourself. But if you don't feel confident or comfortable doing that, then yes, you should probably seek the help of somebody who is skilled in the art of doing patents. Because, as I say, there is a legal side to this too. That was your question.
I think just like what that road map looks like, well, maybe like the initial steps that you should take if you kind of develop like that secret sauce and you want to protect it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stages to most patent applications in most different jurisdictions, but they're all essentially follow the same route. You have to make sure that your patent is unique. So one of the things you have to do is a search, and this is something a patent lawyer will do. And there's certain things that if you do find things that are close, you do need to reference those in a patent in a particular way. You can, and it's often advisable to file a provisional patent, but there's certain legal things you need to be aware of if you're going to do a provisional and then later file for a full patent. But the provisional gives you a certain amount of time to develop your idea without necessarily exposing it in public, without necessarily having to write up the full patent. But you can't just put in a provisional patent and modify it later. There are certain legal restrictions on what you can do with your full patent compared to your provisional patent, so you have to be careful. And then different jurisdictions like Canada, the US, the whole process of applying for patents and filing for patents are different too. So you need to understand that process and the legal thing that goes with that. And there's a cost.
So just everything Veronica said is right on point, but we're sort of lucky, I guess, because we have some internal expertise often in the areas we want to patent. So we have a PhD who really understands what's considered prior art or related things that may be patenting in a similar area. So what we would do at the university is usually I would get a disclosure from a faculty member, which basically tells me about the invention. They can't do that to just anybody, as Veronica says, because you worry about losing your patentability if you speak about that prior to getting any protection. So that's something we haven't said, but we have to remind everybody of. If you have something that you think you want to patent, you have to make sure that you have told nobody who's not part of your inventive team without having a non-disclosure agreement in place, because that can absolutely stop you from being able to get a patent. If you ever sold it to somebody, even if they don't understand how it works, that can stop you from getting a patent in the US. So you really have to understand how quickly you want to get to it, as Rob said, to make sure that you can start figuring out how you want to commercialize it. Anyway, we do sort of those first searches to get an idea of whether or not we think there's patentability there, because it is a very expensive process. And then there's a little book that we'll have there that sort of talks about all the sections that are part of a patent. But oftentimes what we'll do is we'll draft a very rough version of what would be in a patent that will have your title and some rough drawings, a description of the technology, some related technologies that you'd find through that prior art search. And then we would provide that package to a patent agent. At least for us, for something we think has high value, we engage an expert even to do the provisional, which is a little bit cheaper than the patent itself. Because as Veronica said, if you don't include things that were important and then you want to put that in your patent later and you've subsequently disclosed it, which a provisional allows you to do, then you don't have protection for those areas. So working with a professional, Rob's team or other people that can guide you through that process will help you figure out what you want to include. And then if you ultimately decide to go to a full application a year after you file a provisional, then you can spend some more money and get those claims fine-tuned. So it's a bit of a process. So what we try to do is do as much as we can to give a package to those patent agents so that they're going to bill us less, because they'll do it all for you. But the more you give them and the more high value you give them of high quality information, the less they're going to charge you to do that for you in the first place.
Maybe we should circle back to what actually is intellectual property and kind of patentable.
So you'd have utility patents, and so those are things that operate on function, and so something that does something, versus an industrial design, which is how something looks, so like a silhouette of a shape of something, like the camera there that has a certain shape to it versus another camera. And so someone can get an industrial design on that shape versus something like Apple iPods or smartphones and things like that are shape. It's nothing to do with the function. And utility patents and you talk about the provisional patent, that's a patent application. So prior to, you have no rights with that one, but put your stake in the ground. We can talk about that a bit later. And then you have trademarks, which are your logos and your brand names and things like that. And they are very powerful. You can see a lot if you're watching the Raptors games. There's two big things going on right now with people selling unauthorized NBA shirts and things. So logos and things like that, and likenesses of certain players. That's unauthorized, and so they're actually police trying to stem that. And the logo, you might be familiar with Kawhi Leonard's logo for his claw hand kind of thing. So there's a dispute going on about that. And they stand to make millions just off that. And that is very powerful asset to have within your company, and they're pretty easy to get. So then you have trade secrets. So that's where you don't tell anybody. You have to have processes within your organization to make sure that it's not told outside of your company, like KFC with the 11 herbs and spices, right? They will have one group that knows half of the recipe and another group that knows another half of the recipe, and keep that trade secret. And that will last as long as you can keep a secret. But as soon as it's out of the bag, it's out, you can't get any protection on it. And then you have copyright, just like the music and written poems and books and things. So the written word or software, the coding as it's written. And so you see a lot of disputes where that has a certain verse from my song kind of thing. Yeah, those kind of things. So those are the different types. You'd also have the customer list that you'd have within your company that you've developed over time. You don't want someone just leaving and taking that with them. Website URLs are another one that are a saleable item once you have that. And so with the utility patents, you have to show, Brown was talking, that it has to be useful, novel, and non-obvious. Right, so it has to show practicality. It has to be novel in the world, so no one has discussed it. As Sarah was saying, if you discuss it yourself, in many countries like in Europe, if you talk about that in a hackathon or a pitch, enough that you disclosed it, you just knocked yourself out of Europe. You have a 1 year time frame to get that in place within Canada and the US, a couple other countries, but the clock is ticking. And because someone can point back to, you said this back then, and it's 14 months ago, then you won't be able to get a patent. You could be invalidated. And so that's novel around the world. So although it might not have thought it around here, if someone else has it around the world, then you have some issues. And it has to be non-obvious. And so that means you can't make a knife that cuts a tomato and then get another patent on a knife that cuts a potato. It's obvious kind of things, right? So that kind of just gives you that kind of information.
So I think that kind of leads us to when can you claim with patent pending, and how long does that protect?
So with patent pending, a lot of what we're doing right now is the provisional patent application. And in the US, even if people are going into Canada. So that gives you 1 year, but as soon as you have that submitted to the US Patent Office and you have that acknowledgement back from the patent examiner at the US Patent Office, you now have patent pending status. You have your stake in the ground, so anybody else that comes after you is subject to that time frame. It doesn't give you any rights, it's still a patent application, and you can't enforce those rights. So you can't go and say, enforce that on somebody. But in that time frame, if someone does start infringing on what you have, you can put a cease and desist, and then there's legal things around it, but you can start claiming claims based on that time frame.
That's the great, we've had a couple situations, and it's not ideal, because I just told you, we usually use counsel to do our provisionals, but when a faculty member was going to go do a presentation, and this was something we really wanted to think about patenting, we were able to self-file a provisional. It was still pretty strong. We had time to do that, and sort of the minute that got in, got that acknowledgement back, as Rob said, that said you have provisional status. And then you can really talk about it to anybody. Again, as we said before, as long as you don't change anything really, make any real changes from what's in that provisional, then you can talk about it to anybody. I think one of the things you talked about, the grace period, you have that 1 year grace period if there is a disclosure, but the nice thing about a provisional is it's a much cheaper version of a patent. You don't have to have your claims in there. If you are going to use that in your grace period, then you have to put a full application in. So you lose that chance to have a provisional. And then, because we have first to file in Canada and the US now as well, if someone decides to file a patent in the time since you've done your disclosure, and if you do it here in this room in Sydney, it's going to be difficult to prove that you did it before somebody, let's say in New York. So once you get that provisional filed, then that starts that clock that Rob says, so that nobody else can go and file a patent, nobody else can start manufacturing it, nobody else can sell it. And if they do, then you have that opportunity to send a cease and desist letter, which costs you money. There's no patent police, so you still have to have the money to go after that person, but if you have a high value patent, you probably find people to
But then, once you get your patent, you want to sell it and make some money or sell the rights. So what's, I guess, the normal process of what should be like an expectation for people in terms of the royalty for going through that process?
So some of the options that you'd have, right, you could sell a product outright and the patents outright, and so reward versus risk, and you're not going to get as much reward out of that. So the next one up is strategic alliance, then licensing, joint venture, acquisition, and a new venture. So when you operate that as your own new venture, you get to maximize the maximum reward out of that. But not everybody can do all that, especially around the world. So they start, okay, I'll look after my area and then do these other routes for other areas. So technology licensing typically depends on the industry, but typically 5 to 9% is what you would get. But you don't have to do a whole lot after that. So like a laptop is made of 1,000 licenses. So one manufacturer doesn't make the whole trackpad and this and that and that, but they license that in. And for royalties to the patent owner, they are then able to put that into their product and again get as much money through that window as fast as possible. And that's what they're trying to do.
Or some of the bigger companies will trade patent royalties with each other. So you can use mine and I'll use yours, so you don't exchange the money, but you don't infringe on each other's own. But there's many commercial decisions that you want to make that are very important.
And if you're working with an aggressive licensee, they might tell you, oh, we're going to value this at 3.5%, let's say, and they're going to try to tack off as much as they can from what you think their valuation is. There are books and lists and documents you can get that will tell you royalty rates of a lot of things that have been licensed over a certain period of time. In the US, for sure, you can get royalty rate books. And that's the kind of thing that if we were going to license something that we've not worked with before, I would get access to one of those just to see what other things have been licensed for, so that it would give me a bit of a position of information when I go and start trying to negotiate with that company. Because most of the time, a company that has the ability to license your technology is making you think they're more mature than you and maybe try to wean away some of your royalties. So that's a good opportunity to sort of and talk to other people in the community and see if they've done licensing deals and the kind of royalty rates they can expect, because it really is dependent on your technology. I guess the percentage that you're able to get from your licensing.
Maybe add another thing. So that was licensing out. So you're the inventor and licensing out to others. There's a real good opportunity, not used a whole lot here, is licensing in. And so some of the stuff that we do on the pursue side of checking on patents is we find out who competitors are, but also partners. So universities like to do tech transfer. And so you have that opportunity to license in that technology from universities or NASA or NRC and use that within your product to make your product that much better. And again, you want to get it into the market and make as much money through that window as fast as possible.
And to that point, that there's two resources and they might be rebranding. So you can get in touch with me and I can send you links. So there's something called FlinFox, which is sort of a repository of a lot of licenses for a lot of technologies that universities want to license. I think they've just partnered with Wellspring, so I don't know how they're going to rebrand themselves. But the idea behind that is it's kind of a clearinghouse or an Amazon for university technologies that are ready to be out licensed. Just like Rob said, the university isn't going to start a business. They haven't found a licensee and they're looking for somebody. So if you can find those places and it's something that sort of is going to take you to the next step of something you're developing, it's an excellent opportunity to figure out who has that within Canada for you to try to use it. Yeah, the jump box might be in the US. I know for sure it has Canada. I didn't know it was US. But there'd be a similar service in the States, I'm sure.
And there are in most other countries too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have one more question for you guys. So, have a patent and it's about to expire. Is there anything you can do to continue to protect that idea, or is it just game over?
Yeah. I don't want to say we do ring around.
Yeah, it's not game over, but there's various ways to do that depending on the jurisdiction you're in. Some jurisdictions allow you to pay more money for an extension, but you're usually better off trying to modify the patent and apply and go again. It's worth noting that if you do let that patent expire, it is game over, and it's a free fall for anyone to go and use that patent.
So that's kind of the strategy we talk about, is that you have your core technology. And then if you think about, I mean, we're not going to do a spider web for technologies around it because we don't have enough money to do that. But if you have the capacity, you do all these little improvement patents. So even if your core technology is now expired, you have all these other technologies that have made it better that are still under protection. And even if somebody else uses your core technology, they don't have access to any of the other patents you've done around it. So that's a nice strategy that you can build a portfolio. Something else that I read when I was thinking about this coming here too, though, is that it could get out there in the marketplace. As Rob said, that is ticking, and you do a patent, you file a trademark, you might have a copyright on some component of it. Even if someone else tries to get into the marketplace, if you have that brand recognition, people might still go with you because you're that Coca-Cola or you're whatever it is. Coca-Cola is a trade secret. I would argue that there's probably a number of products on the marketplace that have the exact same formulation as Coke, but you don't know that because they've never disclosed what it is. They can't fight against anyone else making a Coke-like product because they don't have a patent on it. They have that trade secret forever, but people still want to buy Coke or they want to buy Pepsi because in their mind they think one of those is better than the other. So that's kind of, if you can create that marketing buzz, people still buy Advil even though you can get generic. Like, there's a reason you go for that. It's not because it's a superior product. It's because you have that trademark that people want to feel an affiliation to. So I guess that's a way of branding. And you can keep your trademark going as long as you pay your fees for a long time. Right? So.
Do we have any questions from the room? Go ahead.
He said Coca-Cola forever, so when does the actual patent run out?
We don't have a patent secret. They don't have a patent.
So as long as you keep a trade secret, it goes forever.
Okay, so the patent pending is 3 years, and then what's the 100? There's something like 100, isn't it?
So I would say a patent pending happens until your patent is issued. Sometimes a patent can take 3 or 5 years to get examined.
We should probably talk about pending patents.
Yeah.
At the end of the
Yes.
section. Because, my view here is that the patent is only as strong as your ability to defend it. And classically, James Dyson electrolytes it. Dyson really lost his shirt because he had to borrow up to the field to defend his patent. But just because you have a patent doesn't give you automatic protection. You still have to be able to defend it in court. Having a well-written patent does help, but it's no guarantee, and it is titled.
Like Sarah said, there's no patent for you.
There's no patent, please. Lost my thought. Public disclosure. I've seen this come up elsewhere before. If you want to patent something, you have to make sure that it hasn't been disclosed publicly somewhere. There's certain rules about what's considered to be a public disclosure too. A friend of mine in New Zealand who got very fed up with having a lot of great ideas and having people patent them, ended up disclosing them in Parish magazine because it was a published work. But it was very rare that anybody would actually see it. So if you can keep it relatively private until you needed it, and then you just play it Parish magazine and say, sorry, it's already public. Yeah, so there's loopholes, things that you can play with. There's all sorts of law. And we touched on copyrights, but there's all sorts of really wonderful ways that you can defend copyrights, and there's certain legal requirements that you have to meet for a copyright to be held and defendable, usually around proof and date. And there's some unique ways you can do that on the cheap too, if you really need to. Music industry background.
Any other questions?
Sorry. I was reading, how they were trying to put names on a patent, and it was company versus person who worked with the company who, planned it out versus the person who drew it out and had no idea from it. So who wants to talk about the value of each person? Like defending a patent is one thing, but whoever commissioned it, whoever worked with it, even if it's a minor part, like how much is a defensive, you know, how much do you defend a patent? If you're a little bit involved versus a lot.
So that's a really important thing. If anyone has a kernel of inventive, a kernel of inventiveness to the idea, you have to make sure they're on that patent. If you leave somebody out because you think their part wasn't big enough, that can invalidate your patent.
Yeah.
If you add someone on because they're a really nice person and they really were helpful to you, that can invalidate your patent. I'm on 2 patents with IBM right now. I had a part of that inventive process. My part versus Dmitry Konevsky, who has 300 patents, is very different, let me tell you. But I'm on that patent because I was part of that team, and I can honestly say I had part of that inventive process. So I'm there, and there's no ranking. It's not like Dmitry Konevsky, 98%, Sarah Conrad, 0.5. No, we're all there. What's that?
Could you defend it?
Oh, I can tell you exactly what they were. I mean, I know that process.
Okay.
But the thing is too, I don't own that patent. So the assignee is IBM. So you have your assigned, your owner, and that can change. IBM can sell that to anybody else they want, but your inventors are always there. You have to make sure you keep that inventorship. How you decide to portion off who gets what percentage of that invention, that's where those inventive proportions come into play. So again, nobody on that patent actually makes any money from it, IBM, except IBM.
Right.
But had we done that as a company, I would have said, you know, the first 3 people on that patent are going to get 99.9% of it, and then the rest of us that are there get a little piece of it.
Yeah, that's a commercial decision.
Yeah.
It's the assignee and how they play it out.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So, had anyone to work in a company and he had his own startup while he joined a company, for example, like this new company gave him training and experience. Had like this company that he works in, like ever make a loss on him, having to make patents while he working there, as like I quote, had they to tell him that you learned the stuff from the company and you gained experiences and like the know-how from the company. To how far can they get the lawsuit with him?
Depends on the employment contract. It's all about the employment contract at that point. So an employment contract can restrict them from doing anything when they're in the employ, or they can restrict them into certain areas when they're in the employ. So if you're going for a job and you think you might be inventing stuff on the side, it's always a good idea to disclose that when you're at the interview and sort out your employment contract to match that. If you don't, most employers will try and put a clause in the employment contract to retain all your intellectual development rights. So if you do develop a new mousetrap at home, they will have the rights because you're employed by them.
That's actually what's happening with the Kawhi Leonard's logo, right? He had a design, he took it to Nike. Nike did some changes, and so now they're in a dispute. Okay, who has ownership of it?
So it can get messy.
Any more questions?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't here for the first few minutes of this, but my business partner and I had an invention. It's got its first non-final rejection. Now, for $1,500 US, we can get the lawyers to take a look at it and say, okay, we'll appeal it or whatever. Before I go and throw another $1,500 American into the mix of this, is there anybody local I can go to for a small sum or something who can look at it and say, hey, forget it, it's not worth your while, or hey, it might be worthwhile pursuing?
That's your first rejection.
Yes, first non-final rejection.
So typically, that's how they weed out a lot of people. and hope that you're going to say no. Typically, you get that first non-final rejection. I remember my first one, and I was all dejected with it. I don't know, I expect that you're going to get it. And so what they're trying to do is prove that you are the inventor. And so then you have to now talk about it and create arguments versus whatever they rejected you with.
Yeah, I was going to say there's usually notes on that rejection as well,
Yeah.
but it's kind of legal coded patent stuff, so you need to read between the lines as to what they're actually telling you. Yeah, it's usually they're trying to lead you out.
There might be a claim or two that you won't be able to get as part of your patent, but it doesn't mean the whole patent isn't going to be, the rest of it, you might still be able to get patented.
Yeah, there's a few claims on it that say you can't use, but
So they might be trying to narrow you down, right?
Yeah.
So
I think this is a game that you play with the patent examiners, right? When you put in your first patent, you want it to be as broad as possible, in the hope that you get it through, but they like to throw it out because they want you to narrow it down, but you don't want to narrow it too much, so you put it back. It's almost a negotiation.
yeah, that's basically when I talked to the lawyers for a few minutes on it, over the phone, of course. That's basically said was, that we expect it to be rejected, and now we hone in. Once the patent office has sent us a couple of copies to say, hey, these are prior claims. He said, once they put that forward, now he said, we narrow it down. But as I say, I'd like to be able to talk to someone before I go and throw another, it's probably like 3,500 Canadian into the mix of this thing. Because someone might have, someone that knows might look at it and say, hey, forget it, or, let my do what you want. But
Did you file the patent yourself?
no, I filed it through a company in the US.
Yeah.
Patent lawyers ended up with before and another patent, which got rejected.
That's one of the things that one of our first patents, that was in a pharmaceutical area, we went, at the time the dollar wasn't so different between Canada and the States, and it adds up so quickly. You can find Canadian firms that are licensed to file US patents as well, so now that's what we do. Because we haven't mentioned, it's important too, is that you could probably go to any patent agency and they say, oh yes, we can do that for you. But it's good to find one that has expertise in the area that you're working on, because rather than have them spend time learning your technology, to have someone that has a PhD and then become a patent agent in the area that you want done really will save you time and money, because they're smart people. They'll learn what it is that you invented. But if you take a chemist who is looking at a chemical patent, they don't have to learn that, because they have to look at how that compares to what's out there already. I don't know if there's anyone, we don't, unfortunately, as far as I know, unless things have changed, we don't have any patent agents in Nova Scotia. I don't even think we have any in Atlantic Canada. So we sometimes work with people out of Quebec or Ontario, and it still is quite a bit cheaper than the US, but I'm not quite sure what happens if you take it now at this point, take something that someone already understands and ask someone to have a second look at it. Someone might do it, they might have a first look for you in hopes that you'll become a client. That might be something you could ask. I don't mind telling you a few of the ones we've worked with that I think are quite good, and you could just give them a call and say, do you do a first look to see if this is something you want to help us with? I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask. So I don't mind sharing a couple that I think are very good. And if you want to tell me the area, even if we haven't worked in that, I can chat with some of my counterparts, maybe at Dell or somewhere else, and they'll say, oh, people that do, we haven't done any engineering patents ourselves, but they might know someone at, Smarter and Bigger in Toronto is one of the patent firms. They might know someone there exactly that you could talk to. So I don't mind having a conversation.
So I think in the interest of time, we'll wrap up here. So I want to thank our panel for coming out, and you guys are going to stick around for a little bit. So if there are people that have questions, maybe you didn't want to show up the road, or we're just going to get time left, check one down. I just want to remind you that we do have prizes. You can enter the draw over here. So I'm picking up the note. I don't think it's you can for your business card, and just a reminder of the events that we have coming up. So actually, a week from today, next Thursday, in this green room, our 5 shortlisted Intersect 3 challenge with Destination Cape Breton will be live pitching in this event. We'll be announcing the winner live, so kind of like Survivor a little bit. No pressure to our shortlist people. So that will be happening next Thursday. And then Wednesday, June 19th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at Dr. Luke's coffee shop, we're having a panel on how do I entrepreneur. So if you've been thinking about entrepreneurship, wondering about more resources and where to get support, that'd be a great event. Yeah. So thanks for coming out, everyone, and make sure you enter into the draw.